Good afternoon. You know, it's very interesting in dance. There are things called closers, and they are the robust pieces, the big pieces that make you feel good as you walk out the door. So we're the closer. We're going to try to. My name is Teresa Ruth Howard. I'm a scholar in residence here at The Pillow. This is my second time in person. I did work with The Pillow during the COVID period, but I'm so happy to be back, and I'm so happy that you are here with me, with us, and we're going to have a wonderful discussion. I'm so happy to welcome Artistic Director of Pacific Northwest Ballet, Peter Boal. Boston Ballet Principal Dancer, Leah Serio. Houston Ballet soloist, Harper Water. And this is the pillow talk of ballet coast to coast. So let's talk a little bit about how this came about, because it is like, yes, ballet companies have graced the stage, you know, in different capacities, but this is something a little bit special. Peter, can you talk to me a little bit about how it came together, how it came about?
You know, it's interesting because there have been so many frustrations during this time where performances aren't happening and groups aren't coming together, and these amazing dancers that are deprived of this interaction and audience relation. And Pam had this idea to, what if we pulled three companies together and had them connect and put a piece together, and what if they united in a choreographer's work? And I must have said yes. But I thought, you know, this is really complicated. I mean, this is not easy to pull together, but you have this incredible willingness of these artists to dance. She mentioned Alejandro Cerruto's name right off the bat, which is sort of like a green light for me. I'm a big fan of his choreography. And even some of the other dancers that I didn't know, a few of them I knew, and just to know that we could have this fusion moment and this reconnection with audiences felt really powerful.
How do you begin to imagine a repertory, right? Because now you're the artistic director, you've got to find not just the piece that represents your company well, the dancers that represent your company well, but then all three of you have got to work together to create programming that kind of makes sense. So how does that conversation, I mean, we know that Pamela had the idea of Alejandro's last piece, second to last, right? She had that in mind, but how did the other pieces come together? How did you agree on what to bring?
Yeah, Pam asked about some suggestions, and many years ago, I can't remember which year, Pacific Northwest Ballet was here, and we did an all Ulysses Dove program. So Dove's work had some roots for us at The Pillow, and it felt like an appropriate work for us to bring back here. I've been very fond of Ulysses as a person, having worked with him, and about his legacy too. And I feel sometimes like his works are a bit scattered to the wind. He didn't have a company that he was a resident choreographer for, and I've worried that his works would get lost. PNB is the custodian of 4 of those, but I'd like to keep his works alive and keep them. There are people that saw that work for the first time today. The rest of the curation was not my doing, so I credit Pam.
There were discussions though amongst the directors of like what fits, what would fit.
I'll say I love the choices that the other directors contributed, so they were wonderful to see.
So let's turn to the dancers. So it's a time of COVID. You have done whatever you're doing, right? Like whether that's in your living room, some people had access to studios. What was that initial feeling when you could say, are you ready to perform on stage? One, you have the opportunity to be on stage again, out of your context of your own company, but also like, how do you begin to emotionally and psychologically as well as physically prepare?
Yeah, it was, when it first was offered to us, I guess it was around like February, March or something like that, I right away said yes without even seeing the contract or seeing anything, any details, because just a moment on stage, we were yearning for that, for sure. So I just jumped on it, of course. I think this whole summer, I've been offered little gigs here and there because everyone's wanting live art. And so every time it was offered, I said yes. So that prepared me for this kind of biggest show kind of thing. That's how I prepared psychologically.
So where Boston Ballet hadn't been on stage, you yourself had been.
Yes.
Like, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And you were doing something that was created in your home in this very specific context. So maybe it wasn't that an oddly far of a reach.
Yeah, it's true. And at first, when I heard that we were going to do home studies, I was a little like, I don't know if that's going to work on a bigger stage. But it translated really well, and I think it kind of was I don't want to say homage, but we all kind of experienced something of that sort in our homes during quarantine, trying to make ourselves laugh, trying to not get depressed or have a panic attack or something like that, analyzing our lives. And I think that really commemorated that, and I was happy that we could share, for sure.
Absolutely. Harper, what were you up to during the COVID moment, and how did you prepare? Had you been also doing smaller projects on your own?
Houston Ballet was really lucky to be creating digital work throughout the time, so we had projects going on, but I remember when our director Stanton, I got an email saying you have a meeting with Stanton, and at first it was sheer panic. I was like, what did I do? And then it was like, I roll another Zoom meeting. I was like, Zoom is like our savior this year, but it's also like another Zoom meeting. But I like got online and I see his face, and just like Leah, like before he even finished the sentence about asking to come here, I was like, yes, I'll do it. Just because, like, similarly, it felt so restricted and confined in our homes, and even though we were lucky enough to be going into our space, it was in pods. It was really, really, I mean, as it should be, made safe, but it didn't feel like this freedom like we had on stage today. And both podadas that I performed today were created on the dancer Karina that I danced with today in different times of Houston Ballet Rep. And so personally, I felt stepping into that role to dance with an artist like Karina, it was a challenge that I wanted to take on, and I thought that it was a beautiful opportunity to come to the Pillow. You know, this was my first performance back since March 12th, March 13th, maybe, when the world stopped. And so it's like I shut the computer from it. I was excited, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do. I like dropped and started doing push-ups to get ready for it. But it was this balance of nerves and anxiousness, but also I just couldn't believe that it was my opportunity to work with an artist like that on work. Like you saw, that was in my mind really, really beautiful, but also beautifully challenging. And so it was an opportunity as an artist to also push myself that I was really excited to get.
So let's talk about, okay, COVID took a lot. And COVID, I will always say dancers this is what we do. We shift our center, we shift our weight, we find our centers. And so that's kind of like what it was. Can we talk a little bit about what COVID, the adaptability that was necessary for ballet companies to move through, to navigate through this space? Can we talk about the pods and how they were, like Peter, maybe you can talk a little bit about how your pods at P&B were formed. Were they not along ranking? Did it create opportunities for dancers who wouldn't normally have opportunities, and did it shift your artistic eye in any way? Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm so over pods. I always had to make them, and they were so maddening because you get them to be right where, this one's with this one off stage, so they have to be in the same pod, and then you'd forget somebody had just moved in with the other person as a roommate, and they also had to be in the same pod, and then there were sibling pods. And so it was really kind of a nightmare. But some of the things, they were pods of 4. I mean, we worked in groups of 4. And we saw some careers have incredible opportunities and some dancers really grow, but it wasn't most of the company. I don't know if you guys felt the same thing. We have a couple that you saw today, Elle Macy and Dylan Wall. They lived together and they danced together all year. And when choreographers came to Seattle, they said, who can I have? And they gravitated towards this couple because no one was dancing together that wasn't living together.
Right.
So 4 or 5 dancers had this amazing year where Jessica Lang was creating on them and Alejandro Cerruta was creating on them. And on to Edward Liang was creating on them, and Chris Wheeldon was creating on them, and it was just sort of, and the rest of the company was like,
I picked the wrong roommate.
One of our principal dancers, Angelica Generosa, I don't know if you guys know Angelica, she went home and talked to her fiance. She's like, can't you pick me up and dance with me?
So now what is that coming out, right? Now these, even if it's not level across the company, you've seen these specific dancers like carry some weight. Does that shift, like when we're all together again, what does that do? Or does it do anything?
Yeah, well, I think, we have these artists that have material that you could see them grow. You saw others that didn't touch anyone for 15, 18 months. And so some of the partnering wasn't as intuitive as it had been before. Amanda and Christopher used to dance together often, but hadn't touched each other in a year and a half. And so refinding it was challenging. But as Leah alluded to, the hunger is so present to work to get on stage. I think dancers are going to make up time because, I mean, every dancer is excited for Nutcracker. That's like never happened.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Can we do more, please? One more snow.
Right.
So Leah and Harper, again about the pods, but also maybe could you talk to me a little bit about, there's a thing that we take for granted as we move through our lives, right? And then, and dancers are very ritualistic, right? We're very regimented and scheduled. When that falls away, what remains? Or what did you discover in this space that you walk away with that maybe shifts your artistry or your perception?
I think when I found out that we weren't going back to work for a very long time, I went through a bout of like, what am I doing with life? What am I without dance? Like going into the studio every day, ritual, like you were saying, that's what I live and breathe, and I think that's all dancers. So I went through a period of depression and questioning, and then it kind of gave me this perspective on life and how much I loved my art and how I had to keep pushing on and adapt and do digital things and just work with people when the offer came and things like that. So I I think my body was almost ready for a little break and to reawaken kind of thing. And as soon as we could use a studio, I started working on bad habits and things and analyzing why my hip was hurting and things like that. And so I think COVID is never going to be considered a gift, but the break was a little bit of a gift to me. And it just made me want to dive deeper into my art. For sure.
That hunger you're talking about.
Yeah, the hunger.
Everyone's gonna be like, let's do it one more time.
Yeah.
Harper, for you?
Yeah, I feel like when we were sent home and it was this period of what's going to happen, are we going to come back ever, and I was sitting in my apartment and there was a lot happening socially and politically in the world at the time, and it just made me realize, as a dancer, we step in, and 90% of the time we step into the space, into the studio, and we're waiting to be told what to do. And I wait for what step, what count. I then have liberty to make it my own and to have, my artistic expression put into it, but ultimately I react to the action. And I felt like at home, I was put into a place where now I had to be the one to make the action. I had to be the one to say, this is what I'm trying to say, beyond dance. And then it kind of, in a spiritual or creative way, it kind of, it merged. And so when we got to go back into the studio, it was about finding the turnout and the point and the extension, but it was also, what am I trying to say with it? And, using my art and my craft to say something. And it just felt more impactful. It felt like the dance was elevating. And so when I got to start dancing with Karina and I got to start dancing on work, it was the trio that you saw today was created on myself and two other dancers. and so it felt really comfortable. And at first I could just do it, but now I had to say something with it, and I wanted to say something with it, and I wanted to make it more special. And so COVID taught me that, and to have the confidence to say something in the climate that was happening, and then to return to dance at the same time, is something that I'm grateful for.
Yeah, obviously with the BLM uprisings, with the space, when you're not worried about casting or you're worried about being in a studio with an artistic staff member, I think it centered humanity in everybody, and as artists, and sometimes dancers don't think about their humanity because it's so about the art. But when dancers realized that they had a voice, that they could project that voice and express some of the things that we kind of all know. Like when you come through dance, we talk about what's wrong with it or the things, but like all of a sudden we were all talking about it. Like we were all like in one communal dressing room, right? And we're like, okay, we have to, as a community, begin to address not just the lack of diversity and equity and inclusion, but the culture of what we do and why we do what we do. Okay, so now let's travel forward. We're here. All three companies, the dancers are on site together. What is that like? Like, tell me about some of those conversations. What's happening now? What did you learn about each other and other companies?
Well, I'd say the power of the internet and social media is that, I had heard of or been friends with a lot of these dancers. A few of them were new faces, and now they're new friends. But the beauty of dance and bringing us together like this, I think it's just we have so much commonalities with each other. So it's easy to connect. And that first night, Chandler and we flew without Karina, and we arrived late, and the Boston Ballet dancers and the PNB dancers were sitting in the common area, and we popped into the door, and we just spent the first night just all in the room chatting and sharing stories and what have you been doing, and getting to know each other. And then the next night after the first day, we were back in the common area chatting, talking, and it built itself on that. And I don't know if it's a pillow or if it's this time, but time really kind of stops here. And it's like we've kind of lost track of what day it was, but there was so many laughs, and it felt like our own little ballet coast to coast traveling company. It felt like summer camp too, though, a little bit. But it's been so fun. It's been so fun.
So fun.
What is it like to be, because you're so used to the dancers that you are in studio with, right? Like who you are in that context. So you're thrown together for an extended period of time, not like just like, a gala, you go a couple days, but like for 2 weeks. You're taking class together, you're rehearsing a piece together, you're watching each other. What is that like? I'm sure like after being like starved for that sort of communion, what was like just being in class and watching people pirouette and struggle and, ooh, this is new, right? What was that like?
Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, I think we all kind of know each other through social media. We see the videos and things like that. And so I just wanted to be in the studio with those people and see how they worked. And we all just really respected each other and our work. And one of the dancers with Boston Ballet, Paul Craig, he taught class every day. And we all just, like, sometimes it was a pop class, like pop music class. And, we just had a lot of fun. And there was never any judgment whatsoever. And I feel like we all helped each other, especially in like Ceruto's thing, and like supporting each other, videoing each other for little rehearsals. So it was totally amazing. I loved it.
Yeah.
Peter, let me come back to you.
Yes.
Pacific Northwest Ballet. I'm going to say part of what I do, one of the hats I wear, is I've coined a title for myself as diversity strategist for the arts, for ballet. And I have to say that Ellen Walker, who's the executive director of Pacific Northwest Ballet, was the first person. I did my first like breakout session at Dance USA, and she was the first person like to stand and like wait for me and talk to me. And she kind of like semi-stalked me in a beautiful way. Like she called me, she emailed me. She was like adamant about understanding how do we address this issue. And I have to say that she and Peter Bowl have been, in my mind, at the fore of this, not just conversation, but not just work, but the action. And I wonder if, and I'm looking at like, there's a lot of stuff happening for PNB coming up in the fall. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing, but also maybe has COVID accelerated or shifted some of that work and those plans?
Yeah, and one of the things I was thinking earlier as these dancers were talking about how COVID affected them, our dancers really went into creation mode. What can I do? Because I felt like, I don't want to get over dramatic, I felt like ballet was on the line.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't know how secure the future was for the whole profession. It was a really nerve-wracking time.
Mm-hmm.
And dancers went home and said, how can we contribute? We'd like to make a dance film. And also they looked at all of their art with a stronger lens of diversity than they had 2 years before, 5 years before. Am I representing an underrepresented voice as a composer, in the dancer, in the choreographer, in the lighting designer? So there was sort of, I think one of the beautiful things about the work is once you start to do the work, others catch on and realize how inspiring it is, important it is, motivating it is. And I think we've seen that at PNB. Right now we're doing racial equity training for 350 employees. It's a lot. It's a 8-hour day that everybody goes through. Thank you.
Well, that absolutely.
It's I've been one of the facilitators for that, and that's something that I think the thing that we all start with is we don't know, we're not experts. We call you a lot to consult about this, but you know, stumbling and tripping and making mistakes, you still have to walk forward. You have to do it. And if you believe in this profession and you believe in your lives and you believe in the community around you, the dancers you love, the musicians, the stagehands, you do it. And you start talking about it and you figure it out. And Ellen is amazing. And she says she talks to you every Sunday, so I wasn't wondering if she was
Yes.
going to call.
We've already texted.
Okay, good.
I was like, Peter has landed. Yeah, I mean, I really do appreciate the work that you're doing and the sensitivity, the humility, the transparency, because it's the leaders of the field, they have to demonstrate that it's valuable.
Yeah.
And what I've also learned working with companies internationally is it's all high school. Everybody wants to sit at the cool table. So if we guys have to create a cool table for all this work, and then people get caught up in the drag, and they have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
So for you dancers, what has been some of your sort of like learning, musings, experience? Either you can speak about it, you know, as it relates to your company, or even just personally about like, has anything shifted for you?
Well, I have a piece that's going on the main stage of Boston Ballet in
Yes.
March. Yeah, and so I think with everything that social justice, everything that's going on, I really wanted to think about a diverse cast. And so that was like on the forefront of my brain when I was casting my piece. And that was something that it was important. It was really important to have representation. And I feel that we have it in Boston Ballet, but sometimes it is not shown as much. And that was my goal. So that was something that really changed in my mind.
I love that. Like, and the idea that the lens changes so that this is how we know the work is working. When people start asking themselves, like they're not calling somebody to be like, help me figure out how to look at this. When you own that interrogation and everything that you do kind of goes like, wait a minute, like, let's look at this. That's a whole lot of white guys. Like, who's missing?
Yeah.
Harper, for you?
Whew.
Okay. It's a safe space.
Yeah, no, I think I'd say off the bat, I learned a lot. But I think personally, it was a struggle, especially when the, BLM started, because I am the highest ranked black dancer at Houston Ballet. And at the time, there were 2 younger dancers in the corps. And we've actually hired 3 more, so that's really great this year. But I felt a personal responsibility to advocate for them as someone higher in the company, to have a voice, and I felt it was challenging to take off the dancer hat and put on the calling out hat at times. And Houston Ballet has a legacy of being an incredibly diverse company, and Lauren Anderson is like my fairy godmother, at Houston, and so she was a huge support system for me. But I think throughout it all, and with the help of Stanton and the company, I realized that I am the activism. I am, by showing up, working hard at my craft, that is powerful. To be present and to show up, and the pressure of saying the right thing, doing the right thing, can be overwhelming for some. And so when I was speaking to the 2 black dancers at the time, they were apprehensive to share their stories, and to, there's this fear as a young dancer of what could happen, and I just wanted to instill in them that, and instilling in them, it reminded me that working at your training every day is powerful, and is part of the activism, and the visibility is really important. And so that is one of the things that I took away from this. And this is, being here and dancing on the Jacob's Pillow stage with Leah, as BIPOC dancers, that's activism. And we couldn't have done that without the support of our directors in our company. So that's one of the things that I took away with.
I love that. Like when I saw the programming for Ballet Coast to Coast, and as a scholar, one of the things that we're asked to do is to write an essay. That generally, if you have a paper, I believe it's online, but if you have a paper program, it's in there. And so, I had to look at it and from different angles, what do I want to talk about? And I'm looking at the pieces, I'm looking at the choreographers, I'm looking at the different eras that these pieces were created in, I'm looking at the dancers, and I'm going something is happening, right? Both in the intentionality of representation. And I think that there's something beautiful, and the thing I love about it most is it's very subtle. It just is, like you said, you can see it and feel it on the stage, represented. I know there had to be things that thought in the conversations, in the curatorial process, in the choosing of the dancers, and I think we should recognize that. I'm talking to you as the community, because part of this work is for all of us to acknowledge when and where it is happening, because oftentimes we're very clear about where it's not happening, but we haven't yet figured out the method to discern when it's actually happening. And maybe, Peter, you can talk to this a bit, because it's not often loud. It's a lot of the stuff that you don't see. And so there can be a misconception about, well, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was fascinated by your essay too, to learn that Red Angels was the second commission from a black choreographer at New York City Ballet from 1948 to 1994. And the first one was just before it, by John Elaine.
Right.
But that was news to me. I'd been in both those pieces and I hadn't known the history. Nobody talked about the history, and that absence had been lost to me, and I guess to my whole generation. Sorry, I got on a tangent.
It's okay, I like it.
Okay.
That sparked another question. But actually, let's go there. Talk to me about the idea of Ulysses Dove working in that space of New York City Ballet, And I mean, I feel like I see certain things, but you were there. And so what was that? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to talk about Ulysses. I was very fond of him because he made two works, which is just sort of a sampling of working with him. But I was telling Harper earlier that there was an incredible bond between Ulysses and that cast of four, and then he came to do a second work and used the same four, so we kept, I don't think there were understudies, I never saw them, they were there, but it was just the five of us would go in every day. And Ulysses was, I mean, he was working in a very white world. I think he came into, he said to me, I wanted to cast the black dancers in the company, but I didn't see any. He said, I saw Albert Evans over there, and I knew almost from seeing him, I'm sure he'd seen performances that I wanted to work with him. And then he said, I was just looking for someone else that could turn. So that was me. I was like, nothing special, but I could turn. But I think Ulysses, he came in with this very guarded sense. He didn't want to give himself to the four dancers or even to the company. He wanted to wait until he felt the trust in him come back to him. He was all about, what are you going to give me? Because I'll give it back tenfold if I feel it. And he had the right group. We were 100% on board to work with him from day one. And so it only took a couple of days until we sort of broke that barrier. And then it was just this friendship between the five of us. But you could really feel it. And I think he'd had situations with other companies where he didn't feel that trust.
Right.
And he didn't give fully of himself. But this Red Angels was a blessing, and then the second piece was Twilight, which was where Ulysses was really, literally dying. And he said he was going to live to the premiere, and he died like 3 days later. And it was an amazing moment of watching art and dance keep someone alive. He just said, I know, sorry.
Okay,
He said, I'm going to get there, and we pulled and we coaxed and we took care of him and we helped him in and out of the studio. And Twilight was not a great work, but it wasn't about that.
No.
It was just about sustaining.
Thank you so much for that. Tell me a little bit about conceptually what that piece, what Red Angels is about for you. Like, what were some of, because I think I see very distinct relationships. What were some of the words that he used and some of the analogies or stories that were the sort of foundation, the underpinning of that work?
You know, you might be surprised. He wanted to address the House of Balanchine. He wanted to address Agon and that history. Every choreographer felt that presence as they walked in. And he wanted to take it and honor it and maybe edge it further. So he was all about technique, about, you know, that's great looking, but are you turning out your standing leg? Your leg is high, but is your foot fully pointed?
Yeah.
I mean, he was sort of like a taskmaster as far as technique. And the ballet is much more technical than people realize. They hear the electric violin and think, oh, it's about how I walk, but it's really about technique.
No, it is so clear that he is like, and it's either right or it's not.
I'm hogging the talking,
No,
so
no,
I'll just say
it's
one more thing.
interesting.
He wanted us to do it again, and we do have hour-long rehearsals, and we would do it 4 times. He was like, so good, one more time. And we were like, but he just wanted, he was the best audience member. Just loved it.
Do we have any questions, comments, concerns from the audience?
So this is a question about, in coming together as 3 companies, was there any competition? Was there healthy competition? Or were there glass in the punch?
I don't think so. I mean, of course, we wanted to represent our companies like extremely well, and of course, it was our first time on stage, like each company, live art. So of course, we wanted to represent. I don't think there was competition at all. I think we were all yelling and screaming when PNB was doing Red Angels, and then Harper doing his solo. We were just, it's like dying of like admiration kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know how the artistic directors and Pam did this, but the chemistry between all of us is amazing, and we're just great friends that I think it will last for a really long time, so it's really cool.
Harper, was there competition?
I will say that, you know, so we weren't in season when we started rehearsing for these works, and so myself, Chandler, and Karina would come in on our off time to do it, and it just would be us in the studio. And so that first day here, and everyone was there, and we kind of were sectioned off into rehearsals. Some dancers would have time off and just stay in the studio, and we would run it. And I felt a little nerves of like, okay, the other companies are here, and you know, they're gonna see it, and what are they gonna think, you know? And it's just, it's a healthy pressure of, I wanted to, we're the Houston Ballet Dancers. We're only 3 of us, you know, we're a company of 60. So I want them to think that our company is great, and I want to represent them well. And it's like when you have a beautiful dancer sitting and being like, it's like I wanted to do it well, but it was never like if you fell out of something that Leah's like, ooh, I saw that, you know. It just was. But yeah, it was like it was definitely this healthy like. Everybody wanted to rise to it, I think, and it was like day one. It was like, okay, this is really happening. We are 3 companies here about to put on 9 shows in 4 days. You know, and we have to do this.
That's epic, just so you know, and that's like heat, not even, you know, in the equation.
Yeah, so it just was, I felt like, okay, you were thinking about pulling up that passe turn, now let's pull it up a little bit more, because Miss Serial is watching. And so, you know, but it's like, I think that I saw in Red Angels too, it was like there was this like extra hunger that came for their solos or something like that, and it just was, the works definitely grew here, and I think that it was because we felt comfortable, but also because we wanted to push each other.
I love the idea that like this looked like one seamless company, like even especially the last piece where you could see potentially differences in levels, and then we have different levels of companies, like from corps de ballet all the way up to principal, right? So the idea that everybody kind of met and merged is really quite amazing and beautiful to watch, right? Yes. So this is the comment about there were 6 couples, is that right? 5 couples. 5 couples, and there's 1 dancer. It was actually Harper today.
Yeah.
They switched casts, but do you want to speak about the idea that that dancer Harper did not get to bow as a collective company,
Yeah.
but just
I just did the first 4 shows, and then of the Ceruto Ballet, and Chandler, who is a dancer with us, he did the last few. So just how the pairings worked out, there was an extra boy from Houston, and Karina got to share the love with us. I will say, just to add to that Chandler is a younger dancer, and he recently just got promoted to demi-soloist at Houston Ballet. But he was saying to myself and Karina the other day that he's never danced a contemporary work. And that this was the first time that he was getting to work on a piece like this. And that opportunity wouldn't have come, you know, unless Jacob's Pillow created this merging of companies. And so him dancing the last piece so seamlessly was really beautiful to watch. And you know, to see his confidence level grow with that. So I'm excited that he had that opportunity. I'm excited I got to watch it.
Was there the gentleman in the hat?
So we worked with Alejandro. He was on site with us for about a week and a couple days. So he worked with us about 2 to 4 hours a day. Since they're duets, it was kind of an easier time to like have Harper and Karina called, and then Michael and I called. But he sent us the videos and assigned the patadas maybe in April. And so we just kind of rehearsed ourselves and learned them and from a video, which is not always perfect. So once we got in the studio with him, he clarified everything. Yeah.
It was It was a little funny the first day because we all flew in, and then the next day we started, And we had all, like Leah said, we've gotten the video of performances, and he assigned us Zapata does. So we had learned and rehearsed on our own. And then the first day after class, it was it said on the schedule all dancers for second to last. So we're thinking he's gonna say, okay, let me see the first duet, we'll start. He goes, let's just run it. And we all started looking around like, is this really gonna? But it kind of was like getting shoved into the deep end. And it was like, we are in this coast to coast process together. And we ran it. And we were like, oh my gosh, we just ran it. And so, you know, he looked so pleased with it that we did our homework and we like passed the first test, but then we had time to work with him one-on-one, which I will say was really challenging for me because we had just been doing ballet for about a year, you know, just class and then something more upright, and to be grounded in a sock and repeat it a bunch of times. My quads were a little tired, but you know, it was that good tired and that working tired, and it was exciting to be a part of that.
Question.
So this is a question about COVID vaccinations. How is that working in the various three companies? Are you going to be back again in the studio together, or are you still? Sorry, Peter Potting. Peter Potting. How is that working? Peter, do you want to talk about what's happening?
So we are back in the studio. All the dancers are in one studio. Actually, tomorrow's the first day they're all going to be in one studio together. We've been doing 25 in one and 15 in the other. And they're all masked, and they've all been vaccinated, and we had a baseline COVID test to return. And if we have a guest that's not vaccinated, there's a series of protocols, testing 3 times a week. But this is basically our plan. We're just doing this every day and hoping we get to performance in September, which is an All Cerruto program, which will be nice for us.
Nice. Leah, what's happening in Boston?
Boston, we start September 7th, and they mandated a vaccination requirement. So we're all vaccinated, and we're supposed to be all in one room for class and things like that, masked as well. So.
And at Houston Ballet?
Houston Ballet has been in season now 3 weeks. We did 1 week back, and then the 2 weeks I've been here, they've been working hard back in Houston. And every dancer is back. We do wear masks. We have a vaccine mandate, so you have to be vaccinated to be in the building. And it was really, really exciting to have 60 dancers in a space.
Yeah.
It made the studio feel a lot smaller, but the feeling was quite special to have everyone back and to see all the faces and to, you know, do the combinations. And so I'm hoping to take that energy and move it forward for an exciting season that we open very soon.
Well, these shows will have helped with your stamina.
Totally.
And being in shape. Let's take one more question. So this is a question not about the sameness, but perhaps about the differences in each company. This could go a number of different ways. Since you were not present, you are excused.
Okay.
Well, we can ask him what he saw, maybe. Right? That's different, right? So, okay, so like Leah.
Oh man, this is a hard one. I think with Boston Ballet, we're very classically based. Miko puts importance on your technical, like really class, more like student wise. But then once we get on stage, I think we like to be super free, and he allows that, which is really nice. I don't know if that's a different, but yeah.
We're just gonna throw something.
Yeah, I'm just throwing stuff out there. We also have experience with like Forsyth and Killian, so a lot of our we approach things in that Forsyth way, where it's super out and proud kind of thing. And so when we were working with Alejandro, we had to kind of tone it down, kind of be internal. So that was it wasn't a challenge. It was just like, let's rethink, kind of thing. Yeah.
Harper, your thoughts?
I think the big difference from our company is that our director is a choreographer, and so when he's so familiar his work, and it's like we know what he wants by just him saying one word or something like that. And so, like Leah was saying, and starting to have to change how we're working with Ceruto, Chandler and I were very upright. Stanton, like he always says, tennis balls under the arms, and pinch your shoulder blades, and really high fifth with your upper body. And we ran the pas de deux, and Ceruto goes, "Good. Could you just be a little softer?" And that was a quality that I think that we had to work on, and that because we just know what our director wants, we work with him, extensively on new works. This past year we did all his work because, it was really challenging to bring in new people, and so I'd say that that's probably, I think, the biggest difference.
And Peter, when you're watching, and also you're familiar with this is your cohort, right?
Yeah.
So can you discern differences? And if so, what would they be?
Yeah, actually what Leah said, I saw the foresight almost immediately in Helen's choreography. There's something about the extension of the arms and the flexing, the hyperextension, and sort of a bigness and a loudness, but not in a bad way. It's just like an extroverting. And then I went right up to Harper to tell him how beautiful his port bra was. That's something that I hope is a source of pride for PNB, but when I see it in other dancers, yours is too. But there's distinct qualities. I do think the choreographers shape companies, be it Bill Forsyth, be it Stanton, be it Alejandro, be it Helen Pickett. I mean, you do see in Leah shaping as a choreographer, but there is a stamp on companies, and the big answer is companies are getting more and more the same.
True. What do you think that P&B's signature would be if you have one?
I think right now it's contemporary work. I think every dancer in the company right now is working with Alejandro. It's not just sort of these 12, it's every dancer in the company. So they're growing through the work, and I think right now we're still Sleeping Beauty and Nutcracker and Swan Lake, but we're developing this contemporary side that I find exciting.
And I just want to close by saying, that's a great question. I just want to close by saying that the measure of both great artists and artistic directors are to have and cultivate dancers and the spirit of the dancer that is adaptable, that is forever. The student can take that note, can take that in and translate that so that whoever is in front of them and they're asking for whatever, they have the ability to do that. So your port de bras, your classical port de bras is what it is, but you're able to drop into that and take that note and make it yours. And the Forsyth, you're able to quiet it down. So I think it's a great exercise in understanding actually maybe the mutability of ballet and ballet companies in
Coast to coast.
With that, I want to thank you all for joining us, and this is the closer for this season, and we were really happy. I was personally happy to be here, and I think that this is a really healing experience for everybody that took part. So thank you.